Long ago, before empires and emperors, before roads stretched across continents and banners flew above stone cities, there was only land. Quiet hills, soft rivers, whispering trees. The wind hummed gently over the land of Latium, in what we now call Italy. The Tiber River flowed softly in the moonlight, winding through forest and valley, its waters untouched by war, unclouded by time. It is here in this sleeping land that our story begins. No one knew that from these hills a mighty empire would rise. But in the silence, the seeds of greatness were stirring. The founding legend, Romulus and Remus. It begins with a myth, as most ancient stories do. A tale carried through whispers and stone carvings, retold by firelight and echoed in marble halls. Once there was a princess named Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin, chosen to serve the gods. But fate, as always, had other plans. The god Mars, god of war, fierce and untamed, saw her and fell in love. From their union came twin sons, Romulus and Remus. But the world was cruel to miracles. Rhea Silvia's uncle, fearful of the prophecy that the twins would one day overthrow him, ordered the infants to be drowned in the river. Yet the Tiber, ancient and wise, had no taste for royal blood. The waters carried the twins gently, laying them in the reeds beneath the Palatine hill. And then came the wolf. With fur black as night and eyes full of wild knowing, the she-wolf cradled the infants, nursed them, kept them warm beneath her body. For days, perhaps weeks, the wild beast raised the children, until a shepherd named Faustulus found them and took them home. Romulus and Remus grew among the sheep and trees, strong and wild like the wind-swept hills they called home. They wrestled in the mud, climbed trees as if they were towers, and dreamed of more than the simple life of a shepherd. One day, as young men, the brothers returned to the place of their rescue, the hills near the riverbank. There they vowed to build a city of their own, but they could not agree on where to build it. Remus chose the Aventine Hill, Romulus the Palatine. Neither would give way. Then came the signs. Birds flying over Romulus's hill, seen as a message from the gods. The argument turned to anger. The anger turned to blood. Romulus struck down his brother. The wind stilled. The river hushed. And Romulus, now alone, laid the first stones of the city that would bear his name, Roma. The 7 hills and the early kings. Rome was not built in a day, nor was it built by one man. Slowly others came, shepherds, farmers, wanderers, exiles, drawn by the promise of something new. Romulus welcomed them all, even the lost and the lawless. His city would be strong, he said, because it welcomed those with nowhere else to go. Rome grew on 7 hills, the Palatine, Aventine, Capitoline, Quirinal, Viminal, Esquiline, and Caelian. These hills were covered in huts and smoke, simple lives clinging to sacred ground. Romulus became the first king of Rome. He ruled with firmness and vision. He created laws, gathered an army, and sought to bring order to the wild. But he also faced a problem. His new city had too many men and too few women. So Romulus devised a plan. He invited the neighboring Sabines to a great festival. As the Sabines laughed and feasted, the Roman men took their daughters, not with cruelty, but with intention. These women would become Roman wives, mothers of a future people. At first, war came. The Sabine men marched on Rome in anger, but the Sabine women, now tied by love and blood to Roman families, stood between the two armies and begged for peace. And so Rome was joined with the Sabines, not by conquest, but by unity. Romulus disappeared from the world many years later. Some say he died. Others say he was taken by the gods and became the deity Quirinus. After Romulus came a line of kings, 7 in total. Some were wise, like Numa Pompilius, who brought religion and ritual. He taught the people to honor the gods, to find peace in tradition, to live not just by war, but by worship. Others were strong, like Tullus Hostilius, who believed Rome must conquer or be conquered. Under his rule, Rome battled Alba Longa and won. But not all kings were noble. The last of the 7 kings, Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud, was a man of arrogance and cruelty. He ruled without respect, and his family's crimes would be the final spark. When his son committed an unforgivable act against a noblewoman named Lucretia, the people rose in anger. Lucretia, filled with sorrow and shame, took her own life, but her voice became a cry for justice. The Romans had had enough, and so, in a wave of quiet fury, the monarchy was ended. In its place, a new system was born, one that would shape the ancient world for centuries. The Roman Republic. The age of kings had ended. The last monarch had fallen, cast out by his own people. But Rome was not left in chaos. From the ashes of tyranny, a new system quietly took shape: the Republic. No more would one man rule by divine right. No longer would the city bow to the whims of a crown. Instead, power would be shared, slowly, carefully, among the people. But in truth, power still belonged to the few, the patricians and the plebeians. In the early days of the Republic, Rome was governed by its patricians, wealthy, noble families who claimed descent from the city's founders. They held the keys to power: the Senate, the priesthoods, the land. They wore fine togas with purple borders and spoke in the calm, assured tones of those who had never gone hungry. Below them were the plebeians, the farmers, soldiers, craftsmen, and laborers. They built the roads, they fought the wars, they paid the taxes. But they had little voice in how the Republic was run. At first, the system seemed to work. Barely. Each year, 2 consuls were elected to lead Rome. They served together for 1 year only, with equal power, so that no man could rise too high. Around them sat the Senate, a council of elders, mostly from patrician bloodlines. The Senate advised, the consuls ruled, the people watched. But the plebeians grew restless. They had fought for Rome, bled for it, died for it. Yet when it came a time to reap the rewards, they were left out. And so began what history remembers as the conflict of the orders, a long, quiet struggle for balance between Rome's upper and lower classes. It would last centuries, but change would come, one step at a time: the rise of representation. The plebeians did not rebel with swords. They did something quieter and more powerful. They left. In the year 494 BCE, during a time of war, the plebeians simply walked out. They marched to a hill outside the city, the Sacred Mount, and refused to return unless their voices were heard. Without their farmers, Rome could not eat. Without their soldiers, Rome could not fight. The patricians had no choice. And so the tribune of the plebs was created, a sacred office elected by the common people, immune from arrest, empowered to veto unjust laws. It was not equality, but it was something, a first crack in the wall. Over time, more rights followed. The 12 Tables, Rome's first written laws, were carved into bronze and displayed publicly so that justice could no longer hide behind tradition. A plebeian could marry a patrician. A plebeian could run for consul. Still, the Senate remained powerful, the elite still strong. But the Republic was evolving, a living idea, adapting with every generation. A republic at war, Rome did not grow through peace. Beyond its borders were rivals, enemies, and wild tribes. To the north, the Etruscans, rich and mysterious, with kings of their own. To the south, the Greeks, colonists with culture and ships. To the east and west, the hills and plains of Italy, filled with people who did not yet bow to Roman law. The Republic had to fight for its place. Rome's armies were made of citizens, men who farmed in spring and marched in summer. They carried oval shields, wore bronze helmets, and moved in strict lines. Their strength was not just in weapons, but in discipline. Battle after battle, year after year, Rome pushed outward. It did not conquer for glory alone. It conquered to survive. Sometimes they lost. Once, a Gallic tribe from the north stormed the city itself in 390 BCE. They sacked Rome, burned buildings, demanded ransom and gold. It was a wound that never healed. Rome rebuilt, stronger, more cautious, more determined. They said afterward, "Rome may fall, but Rome does not die." The Punic Wars begin. But even as Rome gained control over the Italian peninsula, a greater rival loomed across the sea: Carthage. Carthage was a mighty city in North Africa, rich from trade, skilled in sailing, and proud. It ruled the waves and held sway over islands like Sicily and Sardinia. For a time, Rome and Carthage existed side by side, uneasy neighbors. But that could not last. In 264 BCE, war broke out over a dispute in Sicily. What followed was the first of the Punic Wars, a series of brutal, epic conflicts that would span over a century. Rome, a land power, had no navy, but it built one from scratch. Copying Carthaginian ships, adding a device called the corvus, a boarding bridge, Rome turned sea battles into infantry combat, where it had the advantage. After decades of fighting, Rome won. Sicily became Rome's first province. But the peace was fragile. Carthage waited, watched, prepared, and then came Hannibal. Hannibal in the Second Punic War. Hannibal Barca was not just a general. He was a legend. Raised to hate Rome, trained from childhood in strategy and war, he vowed never to stop until Rome was destroyed. In 218 BCE, he made his move. He did not sail across the sea. He did something no Roman thought possible. He marched with tens of thousands of men and dozens of war elephants over the snowy Alps. It was a journey of pain, frost, death. But Hannibal emerged in northern Italy, and the Romans were stunned. He won battle after battle: the Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and finally Cannae, where Hannibal's forces slaughtered over 50,000 Romans in a single day. It was one of the worst defeats in Roman history. And yet, Rome did not fall. The Senate refused to surrender. The people held firm, and a new Roman general, Scipio Africanus, sailed to Carthage and forced Hannibal to return home. In the Battle of Zama, Scipio defeated him. Hannibal fled into exile. Rome had survived, but it had also changed. It was no longer just a city of hills and farms. It was an empire in all but name. Rome had survived Carthage. It had claimed new lands, new wealth, and new enemies. But the greatest threat to the Republic was no longer beyond its borders. It was inside the city, inside the Senate, inside the hearts of ambitious men who dreamed not of serving Rome, but of ruling her. Wealth, corruption, and the price of empire. With every victory, Rome grew richer. But not everyone shared in the spoils. The patricians, already wealthy, became wealthier still. They bought land from struggling farmers. They filled their villas with marble, mosaics, and slaves. They wore silk instead of wool. They dined on exotic food from Egypt and Gaul. The plebeians, once the backbone of the Republic, found themselves pushed aside. Farms were abandoned. Families crowded into tenement buildings in the city, where disease and hunger crept in like smoke. The Senate bickered. Factions formed. Alliances broke. Bribes were passed under tables like whispers in the dark. The Republic was still standing, but it was cracking. The rise of the generals. Into this chaos stepped the generals, men who were not born kings, but who earned loyalty from their soldiers, not from law. They promised land, wealth, protection, and in return, they asked for loyalty. Among them was a name that would echo through the centuries: Gaius Julius Caesar. He was born into a patrician family, but not a powerful one. He studied rhetoric. He traveled. He watched the Senate carefully and saw what it had become: a tired machine clogged with pride. Caesar was clever, charismatic, patient. He knew that true power didn't sit in the Senate chambers. It marched in the boots of Roman legions. The first triumvirate, Caesar did not rise alone. He formed a secret alliance with two other powerful men: Pompey the Great, Rome's most celebrated general; Crassus, the wealthiest man in the Republic. Together, they controlled politics, military, and money. With their support, Caesar became consul in 59 BC. After his term, he was granted control over Gaul, a vast wild land beyond the Alps. There, he would build his true power: the conquest of Gaul. For nearly a decade, Caesar waged war across Gaul. He fought fierce tribes, crossed rivers, and built bridges faster than nature could destroy them. His writings, the Gallic Wars, tell the tale in calm, precise language. But the truth was far more brutal. Villages were burned, cities besieged, thousands killed. But in Rome, Caesar's popularity soared. He sent back gold, exotic animals, and prisoners of war. The people cheered. The Senate grew nervous. They feared what Caesar had become, not just a general, but a hero. A hero with an army. Crossing the Rubicon. In 49 BCE, the Senate, pushed by Pompey, ordered Caesar to disband his army and return to Rome, alone. Caesar paused on the banks of a small river in northern Italy, the Rubicon. To cross it with troops was treason. To disobey was dishonor. The moment hung in the air like fog. Then slowly Caesar rode across the water. The die is cast. Civil war had begun. Caesar versus Pompey. Rome descended into chaos. Caesar marched south. Pompey fled to Greece. At Pharsalus, their armies met. Caesar's troops were outnumbered, but better trained, more loyal. The battle was short. Pompey fled again, this time to Egypt, where he was assassinated before Caesar arrived. The war was over. The Republic was on its knees. Caesar returned to Rome not as consul, not as senator, but as dictator. He wore no crown, but the power was his. Caesar the reformer. Caesar ruled swiftly. He forgave enemies, passed new laws, reformed the calendar, gave land to veterans, expanded citizenship. To many, he was a savior, the man who brought order. To others, he was a threat. They saw him not as a reformer, but as a king in disguise. And Rome had vowed never to have another king. The Ides of March. On a quiet morning, March 15th, 44 BCE, Caesar walked toward the Senate. He was warned. A soothsayer had told him, beware the Ides of March. But Caesar smiled, dismissed it, entered the hall, and there among marble columns his enemies waited. They drew knives, and in a storm of betrayal they stabbed him, again and again. Even Brutus, whom Caesar had trusted like a son, joined them. Et tu, Brute? And then he fell. After Caesar, the city fell silent. Caesar's death was meant to save the Republic, but instead it shattered it. His funeral turned into a riot. His name became sacred. His assassins fled. And in the shadows, new power was forming, in the hands of his heir, Octavian. Rome was mourning. Julius Caesar, hero, traitor, reformer, tyrant, was gone. His blood had barely dried on the Senate floor, and already the streets were stirring, not with celebration, but with confusion, grief, and fire. For though the men who killed Caesar claimed to defend liberty, the people saw something else: betrayal, treachery, and worse, the return of chaos. The Republic had survived kings, wars, invasions, but Caesar's death fractured it like glass. And into that fracture stepped a new name. Quiet at first, careful, young, Octavian, the boy heir. He was only 18 years old when Caesar died. Not yet a soldier, not yet a statesman. But he was Caesar's adopted son and legal heir. His name carried weight now. Not just Gaius Octavius, but Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. Some laughed. Others underestimated him. They wouldn't for long. Octavian moved quickly. He raised an army, won over the Senate, and formed a new alliance, this time a formal one with two powerful men. Mark Antony of Tyranny, Caesar's closest general and loyal friend. Lepidus, a high-ranking official with military command. Together, they were the second triumvirate. And their first act? To hunt down Caesar's killers. The revenge of Caesar. In 42 BCE, the assassins of Caesar, Brutus and Cassius, faced Octavian and Antony in the Battle of Philippi in Greece. The fighting was bitter, brutal. In the end, both Brutus and Cassius fell on their own swords. The Republic, they said, had died with them. But the alliance that had avenged Caesar began to crack. Antony and Cleopatra. Mark Antony took the command of the East, Egypt, Asia, and beyond. There, he met a queen unlike any other, Cleopatra VII. She was brilliant, political, charming, a ruler in her own right, and once Caesar's lover and mother of his child. Now she became Antony's. Together they ruled from Alexandria. They spoke not just of Egypt, but of a new vision, an empire that looked east, not west. Coins were minted with both their faces. Their children were given Roman titles. To Rome, this was treason. To Octavian, it was opportunity. Civil war. One last time. Back in Rome, Octavian controlled the Senate, the legions, and the people. He began a campaign of words, not swords, painting Antony as a traitor, bewitched by an Eastern queen. By 32 BCE, diplomacy was over. Rome declared war not on Antony officially, but on Cleopatra. In 31 BCE, at the Battle of Actium, the two sides met at sea. Octavian's admiral, Agrippa, outmaneuvered Antony and Cleopatra. Their fleet faltered. Their plans collapsed. They fled to Egypt. 1 year later, surrounded, defeated, and shamed, both took their own lives. Cleopatra is said to have let a serpent bite her. Quietly, dignified, a queen until the very end. Octavian becomes Augustus. Rome belonged to one man now, but Octavian was careful. He did not declare himself king. He did not crown himself emperor. Instead, in 27 BCE, he returned power to the Senate, who in return gave him new titles. Princeps, first citizen, imperator, commander, and above all, Augustus, the revered one. He was now Caesar Augustus, and though the Republic still existed in name, the age of emperors had begun. Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Augustus ruled not by fear, but by stability. He reformed laws, rebuilt temples, cleaned up corruption, and secured the borders. Roads stretched across the empire. Trade flourished. Soldiers were paid, taxes were collected, and the people, for once, were content. This era became known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. It would last over 200 years. Augustus was no tyrant. He knew how to hold power without appearing to clutch it. He ruled for over 40 years, quietly reshaping the Republic into an empire, brick by brick, word by word. And when he died, the Senate declared him a god. The imperial family. After Augustus, emperors would follow, some wise, some wicked. Tiberius, a gloomy man, cautious and cold. Caligula, young, unstable, and cruel. Claudius, overlooked at first but competent. Nero, infamous for fire and madness. Some ruled with care. Others ruled with chaos. But all owed their power to Augustus, to the system he had built so quietly that Rome barely noticed the Republic had died. Life inside the empire. But what of the people? Most Romans were not emperors or generals or senators. They were bakers and scribes, fishermen and farmers, women who sold figs in the market, children who played in narrow streets between crumbling insulae, slaves who toiled in silence, freedmen who dreamed of citizenship. A Roman citizen had rights to vote, to marry, to appeal to Caesar himself. They bathed in great bathhouses, debated in forums, worshipped in temples. They followed the calendar Augustus gave them, the one we still use today. And above all, they belonged to something larger than themselves. They were Roman. The age of Augustus had ended, but his empire lived on, vast, majestic, and growing still. Rome stretched from the windswept cliffs of Britannia to the golden sands of Africa, from the Rhine to the roaring Tigris. It was an empire of marble, of discipline, and of dreams. At its peak, more than 70 million people lived under Roman rule, nearly a quarter of the world's population at the time. But with every sunrise, even in peace, the shadows slowly lengthened. The 5 good emperors. After a time of turmoil, Rome found stability in a remarkable chain of rulers, later called the 5 good emperors. None were born sons of the previous. Each was chosen for merit, not blood. Their reigns, from 96 to 180 CE, became a golden age for the empire. Nerva. The first was Nerva, an older man, wise and calm. He ruled only briefly, but set a powerful precedent. He adopted a capable heir, instead of passing the throne by blood. That heir was Trajan, the builder. Trajan expanded the empire to its greatest size. He led campaigns in Dacia, modern Romania, adding gold-rich lands to Rome. Under him, the empire stretched from the Scottish Highlands to the Persian Gulf. In the heart of Rome, he built Trajan's Forum, a grand plaza of libraries, markets, and the magnificent Trajan's Column, still standing today. But Trajan's true legacy was not in marble, but in bridges, roads, and aqueducts. The bones of the empire. Hadrian, the traveler. Trajan's adopted son, Hadrian, had a different vision. He ended expansion. Instead, he focused on strengthening the borders. He traveled constantly, visiting every corner of the empire. In the north of Britannia, he ordered a wall built to keep out Celtic tribes. Hadrian's wall still stands, stretching across England, stone by stone. The whisper of a distant frontier. Hadrian was a lover of art, architecture, and his companion Antinous, whose tragic death would lead to temples and statues in his honor across the Roman world. Antoninus Pius. Antoninus Pius ruled with gentleness. His reign was so peaceful that many Romans forgot what war felt like. He improved the laws, treated the provinces with respect, and never left Italy during his long reign. Sometimes, peace is the most powerful legacy of all. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher. The last of the five was Marcus Aurelius, a thinker, a stoic, and a warrior. His reign was not easy. Plagues struck. Barbarians pushed at the borders. Yet he ruled with a calm mind and a steady hand. He wrote his thoughts in a journal, quiet reflections on duty, pain, and wisdom. Today it's known as Meditations, and it remains one of the most beloved works of philosophy ever written. But Marcus made one tragic mistake. He broke the chain of adoption and named his biological son as heir. That son was Commodus, the beginning of decline. Commodus was not like his father. He preferred games to governance. Dressed as Hercules, fought in the arena for show, spent lavishly and ruled erratically. Though the empire still stood strong in stone and steel, cracks had begun to form. Corruption in the provinces, heavy taxes on the poor, a growing divide between rich and poor, plagues that thinned the population, barbarian raids on the borders, and perhaps worst of all, the Senate had grown silent. Rome at its height, yet to the average Roman, life still held wonder. In Rome, the Colosseum rose like a mountain of stone. Inside, tens of thousands gathered to watch gladiators, wild beasts, and spectacles. The Pantheon opened its great oculus to the sky, a temple to all gods, old and new. Merchants traded spices from India, silk from China, gold from Africa. Public baths offered rest. Philosophers lectured in the forums. Children studied Latin and Greek, practiced rhetoric, and traced their letters on wax tablets. There was noise, yes, but also rhythm. Rome had become more than a city. It was a world, a way of life. Religion and change. As Rome grew, so did its religions. The old gods, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, still had their temples. But new beliefs took root. Mithras, a Persian deity, became popular with soldiers. Isis, the Egyptian goddess, found worshippers among women and slaves. And in small, quiet rooms, another religion was spreading, one that spoke of peace, humility, and salvation. Christianity. At first ignored, then mocked, then feared. Christians were persecuted, sometimes brutally, but they endured. And in time, they would transform Rome itself. The empire still stood, strong, proud, eternal, or so many believed. But the marble was cracking. It began not with one great disaster, but with many small ones. Too small to notice, too easy to ignore. And yet, day by day, year by year, Rome began to unravel, quietly, softly, like a tapestry loosening at the edge. Emperors come and go. The time after Marcus Aurelius brought instability, a revolving door of emperors, many chosen by soldiers, some ruling only months. They were generals, not statesmen. The army had become kingmaker, and where once Rome feared tyranny, Now it feared something worse: uncertainty. Some emperors were noble and tried to restore order, like Aurelian, who was called restorer of the world. But most were short-lived, caught in webs of betrayal, invasion, and corruption. In just 50 years, over 20 emperors rose and fell. The empire still marched, still traded, still taxed, but it no longer dreamed. Crises on every border. To the east, the powerful Sassanid Empire of Persia challenged Roman control. To the north, Germanic tribes, Goths, Vandals, Franks, pushed against the Danube and the Rhine. Cities were attacked, legions stretched thin, villages abandoned. To feed the army, taxes rose. Currency was debased. The economy cracked. A sense of dread crept in, not loud but ever present. Diocletian's Great Divide. Then came Diocletian, a general of great discipline and vision. In 284 CE, he took the throne and began to restructure everything. The empire was split in two, east and west. Each half had its own emperor and assistant. The government was reformed, militarized, and hardened. This system, called the Tetrarchy, brought temporary peace. But it also acknowledged a dangerous truth. Rome was now too big to be ruled by one. The East was rich, Greek-speaking, full of trade and cities. The West was poorer, more rural and vulnerable. The seeds of separation had been planted. Persecution of the Christians. Diocletian, despite his reforms, feared something strange growing inside the empire, something he could not control. Christianity. Christians refused to worship Roman gods, refused to bow to emperors as divine. They gathered in secret, sang of peace, buried their dead in catacombs beneath the cities. To Diocletian, this was rebellion. In 303 CE, he launched the Great Persecution. Churches were burned, scriptures seized, Christians imprisoned and killed. But the faith did not break. It spread in the shadows, like a river underground. Constantine, the emperor of a new faith. In 306 CE, a young general named Constantine emerged from the west. He was ambitious, clever, and bold. In 3000 CE, on the eve of battle near the Milvian Bridge, Constantine claimed to have seen a vision, a cross of light in the sky, with the words, "In this sign you will conquer." He won the battle. And in 313 CE, he issued the Edict of Milan, declaring freedom of religion across the empire. The persecution ended. Christianity, once hunted, was now protected. Constantinople, a new Rome. Constantine looked east. In the ancient Greek city of Byzantium, he built a new capital, Constantinople, the city of Constantine. It had harbors, walls, and palaces. And more than that, it had vision. Rome, the city of seven hills, was still sacred. But Constantinople would be the future. It would outlive Rome itself. And for over 1,000 years, it would stand as the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire, later called the Byzantine Empire. The rise of the church. With Constantine's support, Christianity grew rapidly. Churches rose beside temples. Bishops debated doctrine. Councils gathered to decide what the faith truly meant, such as the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE. The once hidden sect became a central pillar of Roman identity. A century later, under Emperor Theodosius, Christianity was declared the official religion of the empire. The old gods, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, faded. The cross now watched over Rome, the sack of Rome. But faith could not stop the storm. In the West, the empire weakened. Armies were underpaid. Cities fell into decay. Tribal federations were allowed to settle inside Roman borders, sometimes allies, sometimes not. Then in 410 CE, a horror unthinkable for 800 years, Rome was sacked. The Visigoths, led by Alaric, entered the city. They looted for days, not with fire, but with silence. The empire's heart had been pierced. The world trembled. The eternal city was mortal after all. Vandals, Huns, and collapse. In the decades that followed, chaos returned in waves. The Vandals crossed from Spain into North Africa and even attacked Rome again in 455. The terrifying Huns, led by Attila, stormed across Europe, though they were eventually turned away. Provinces broke away. Roman legions were outnumbered, outmatched. By 476 CE, the Western Roman Empire, once home of emperors and senators, came to an end. The last emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by a Germanic chieftain. The Eastern Empire in Constantinople endured, but the West was gone. What remained? Rome fell, but not in fire and blood alone. Its roads remained. Its laws echoed in new lands. Its language shaped Europe. Its religion spread across the world. The Catholic Church, centered in Rome, carried the memory forward, one bishop at a time. The idea of Rome would never truly die. The Western Roman Empire had ended. But what is an empire, really? Not just borders on a map, not just palaces and crowns. An empire is an idea, a language, a way of life. And though Rome the city had been bruised, and Rome the empire had collapsed in the West, Rome the idea lived on. A new Rome, the Byzantine Empire. To the east, in the shining city of Constantinople, the empire still breathed. They called themselves Romans. They spoke Greek, prayed in Christian churches, and wore imperial purple. They built grand halls, taught Roman law, and debated theology in echoing basilicas. Today we call them Byzantines, but they never used that word. To them, they were simply continuing what had always been Rome. Justinian and Theodora. In the 6th century, one emperor rose above the rest, Justinian. He ruled with ambition to restore the empire, to bring glory back to Rome. By his side was Theodora, his wife, and equal in mind and voice. Once an actress, she became a wise, powerful empress, defending women's rights and guiding policy with courage. Justinian sent his general Belisarius to reclaim lost lands. And for a time, parts of North Africa, Italy, and Spain returned to imperial control. But war was costly, and the old world was changing. Still, Justinian's true legacy was not just military. The code of law. He gathered scholars and legal minds to collect centuries of Roman law, thousands of scrolls, decrees, and rulings. The result was the Corpus Juris Civilis, the Justinian Code. It would become the foundation for modern legal systems across Europe, echoes of Roman order surviving even into today. The Hagia Sophia, Dome of Heaven. In Constantinople, Justinian also built a marvel. The Hagia Sophia, Holy Wisdom, a church unlike the world had ever seen. Its massive dome seemed to float, weightless, above a sea of candlelight and gold mosaic. When sunlight poured in through the windows, it shimmered like heaven itself. For nearly 1,000 years, it was the largest cathedral on earth. And when Justinian first entered its halls, he whispered, "Solomon, I have surpassed you." Life in the Byzantine world. In the Byzantine Empire, life was a delicate balance of ancient tradition and new faith. Chariot races in the hippodrome still thrilled the masses. Religious icons adorned homes and churches. Emperors walked beneath mosaics of Christ flanked by angels. Education flourished. Greek philosophy was copied, preserved, passed on. Medicine, science, and art still bloomed. The world had changed, but Rome's spirit still glowed like an oil lamp in the dark. Church divides, but even within the faith, cracks began to form. In the West, the Pope in Rome led the Latin Church. In the East, the Patriarch of Constantinople led the Greek Church. Over time, disagreements grew. Language, Latin versus Greek, doctrines, rituals, even bread used in communion. Authority, but who truly spoke for God? In 1054, the final break came. The Great Schism. Rome and Constantinople, once twin hearts of the empire, now led two branches of Christianity, Catholic and Orthodox. Another silent parting. Islam, crusades, and pressure. As centuries passed, the Byzantines faced new challenges. To the east, the rise of Islam brought powerful new caliphates. Arab forces captured lands once Roman, Egypt, Syria, and the Holy Land. The Byzantines fought to hold their ground, and sometimes they asked for help. That help came from the West, in the form of the Crusades. But the Crusades brought more than soldiers. They brought tension, greed, and eventually betrayal. In 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, Western knights sacked Constantinople, not Muslim lands but Christian brothers. It was a wound that never healed. The fall of Constantinople. For 2 more centuries, Constantinople endured, a shining city on a shrinking island of empire. But the world had changed. In 1453, the Ottoman Turks, led by Sultan Mehmed II, surrounded the city with cannon and army. The Byzantines resisted, but they were few. On May 29th, the walls finally fell. Constantinople, last light of Rome, was taken. And with it, the Eastern Roman Empire ended, nearly 1,100 years after Rome's beginning. Rome's legacy. But endings are not always the end. Rome lives on in unexpected places. In the languages of Europe, Italian, French, Spanish, Romanian, all born from Latin. In laws and courtrooms shaped by Roman principles. In architecture, domes, arches, columns. In roads some still walked upon today. In the calendar, the months, even the names of our days. And in the dream, the idea of civilization, empire, justice. Rome never truly died. It changed. It passed like a torch, from Caesar to Constantinople, to cathedrals, to cities, to you. You are not a senator, not a soldier, not a god or a slave. You are simply Roman, a citizen of a vast empire, one of millions. You live in a city of marble and clay, temples and taverns. And today, like most days, begins with a soft light spilling into your room from a narrow window. Waking up, your bed is made of wooden rope covered with a woven blanket. The walls are painted, perhaps with vines, birds, or the gods of your household. You rise slowly, feeling the dust between your toes. There's no alarm, no electricity, only the rhythm of the sun in the city. The street outside murmurs with life. Breakfast. You break your fast with a piece of bread, perhaps dipped in olive oil or paired with a bit of cheese or dried fruit. Coffee doesn't exist here, but you might sip a light wine or water mixed with herbs. The kitchen is simple: a hearth, a pot, a few jars of grain and spice. Everything smells of yesterday's fire. The city awakens. Outside, the city stirs. Vendors open their stalls, shouting the names of their goods. Bread, honey, cloth, garum, a salty fish sauce Romans love. Carts roll over cobbled roads. Children laugh. Priests sweep temple steps. The city is alive. You pass walls covered in painted notices, plays, politics, even graffiti left by lovers. I was here. I loved. I lost. I returned. The Forum. You walk to the Forum, the beating heart of Roman life. A place of gossip, trade, speeches, and justice. Men in togas argue politics. Merchants sell silks and spices from across the world. A statue of Caesar watches silently as life continues beneath him. Everything is loud, yet there's a harmony to it. Everyone knows their place. Family and roles. In Rome, family is sacred. The paterfamilias, the male head of the household, leads with authority, but also duty. Children are taught respect, tradition, and law. Women manage the home, teach the young, and often run businesses from behind doors. Slaves, though common, are part of the household too. Some born into service, others taken in war, some even freed and made family. Roman life is layered, complex, yet familiar. Lunch and leisure. Midday brings a break. Shops close. The sun is strong. People gather under shaded porticos or in gardens. You might share a small meal: olives, figs, lentils, perhaps a bit of roasted meat. The wealthy retreat to private villas, the poor to shaded courtyards, and sometimes there is nothing to do but talk, laugh, nap. Time moves slowly. Rome is in no rush. Entertainment. In the afternoon, you might head to the amphitheater or baths. The Colosseum hosts games, not every day, but often enough to excite the crowd. Gladiators fight. Animals roar. The emperor watches. But today you prefer peace. So you visit the baths, great halls of steam, warm water, and conversation. Here, everyone is equal. Rich or poor, citizen or freedman, all soak, cleanse, and rest. There is something deeply Roman about bathing. Not just cleaning the body, but refreshing the soul. Evening and dinner. As the sun lowers, golden light spills across rooftops. Shadows grow long. Families gather for the main meal of the day, cena. The poor might eat porridge, beans, or bread with garlic. The rich feast, eggs, olives, fresh vegetables, fish, fruits from Africa, wine from Gaul. Dishes are flavored with herbs, honey, and that ever-present garum. Stories are told, poetry recited. Sometimes musicians play in the background. The air is soft with warmth, wine, and memory. Night in Rome. As night falls, torches flicker in the streets. The city quiets. The stars emerge over domes and rooftops. Children sleep beneath wool blankets. The elderly sit by coals. Dogs bark in the distance. Some pray to the lares, the household gods, for safety through the night. Others gaze silently at the moon, wondering what tomorrow might bring. Dreams of empire. In your sleep, you do not dream of conquest. You dream of fields, rivers, music, firelight. You dream of Rome not as an empire, but as a home. And in that dream, you hear the whisper of centuries, voices in Latin and Greek, echoing through time. Roma Eterna, Rome eternal. The Roman army was not just a fighting force. It was a way of life, a discipline woven into the very fabric of the empire. A legionary woke early, greeted by the soft light of morning. His armor was heavy but familiar, made of overlapping strips of metal called lorica segmentata. His shield was large, curved, a steadfast companion. His sandals caligae were sturdy, worn from miles of marching. Daily routine. The camp was alive with quiet activity. Soldiers polished their weapons, prepared their meals, and maintained their tents. Training was constant but measured. Practice with the gladius, the short sword, with the pilum, the spear. But even amidst preparation, there was time for rest, for stories, for camaraderie. The legion was a family. On the march, when the order came, the legion moved with precision, step by step, mile by mile, across dusty roads and green hills. Soldiers carried packs filled with food, tools, and gear. They set up camps each evening, fortifying their temporary homes with wooden walls and ditches. Life was hard, but the rhythm was steady, almost hypnotic. Battles told softly. Roman battles were more than chaos. They were carefully planned dances. Lines of soldiers formed tight ranks, shields locked together like scales, spears thrust in unison. Not a mad clash, but a disciplined pulse. The enemy could be fierce, tribes, kingdoms, invaders from distant lands. Yet the legion stood firm, holding the ground. Famous battles. Some battles echoed through history. The Battle of Alesia, where Caesar's legions surrounded the Gauls. The Battle of Teutoburg Forest, where Rome faced a crushing defeat in dense woods. The long struggles with the Parthians and later the Sassanids in the east. Each battle carried lives, hopes, fears, but also lessons. The cost of war. But war was not glory alone. It was loss, courage mixed with sorrow. Soldiers wrote letters home, whispered prayers for their families. They dreamed of peace, of returning to olive groves and quiet evenings. The decline of the Roman army. As the empire aged, the legions changed. Recruitment grew harder. Foreign mercenaries joined ranks. The once unified discipline slowly frayed. Yet even in decline, the legacy remained. The Roman soldier, standing guard on history's doorstep, embodied duty, endurance, and resilience. Rest and reflection. At night, under the stars, soldiers shared stories of home. Their voices low, their laughter soft. The campfires flickered, casting long shadows. The pulse of the empire slowed, but never stopped. The mighty empire, once stretching across continents, was no more. Cities that once hummed with life now lay silent or under new rulers. But Rome's spirit, that endured. The slow fade. From the 4th century onward, changes came slowly. The capital moved to Constantinople. Barbarian kingdoms rose in the west. But Rome was never forgotten. Its laws, its roads, its ideas survived, passed on like treasured heirlooms. Life goes on. Simple folk tilled fields once Roman. Children played in streets once paved by legions. Temples became churches. The world changed shape, but the pulse of humanity kept beating. Dreams of Rome. Rome became a dream, a symbol of order, power, culture. Poets wrote of its glory. Kings claimed its mantle. Artists painted its ruins. Even today, when we think of civilization, we think of Rome, a final lullaby. Close your eyes now. Imagine the olive trees swaying in a gentle breeze. Hear the soft footsteps of history, fading but never gone. Feel the peace of a story told. A journey ended. Good night from ancient Rome. May your dreams be eternal.